Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. It's been a while since I've posted, but I wanted to come back and share a retrospective of my watercolor journey from 2023 to 2025. I wanted to create this video so that whether I throw these away, whether they're sold or become a part of somebody else's collection, or even just stay with me, I wanted to have a record of a period of learning, like a visual timeline of how I went from gaining knowledge, I guess, about watercolor, getting a deeper understanding, I would say. A lot of these things just get stored and I rarely revisit them, and I haven't seen these in a long time. So I started using watercolor in 2021 through illustration practice. I was mostly combining it with gouache and ink. So I would use watercolor as like a supportive tool. It would be the underpainting under my acrylic gouache. So around 2023, that's when I became more interested in watercolor on its own. And I sought out to understand the medium. A lot of discovery, a lot of curiosity. I was just learning the language of watercolor, just creating these small portraits. I had limited paper. I didn't want to waste any material. And now when I look at these small portraits, I think that the pen and the ink really helped me transition. I feel like it kept me in my comfort zone. I wasn't really trying to learn anything technical about watercolor. It was more so I was observing how colors blended together, how many layers could I layer on top of the previous layer once it dried, or if it wasn't dry, how transparency even worked, how to maintain that. When I first bought cotton paper, it was Fabriano Artistico. I bought a cold press and a hot press pad that were on sale. I honestly thought that something was wrong with this paper. I thought that I got a bad batch, that it was defective. I've heard a lot of artists talk about cotton paper creating like a better experience and being a major improvement, but I couldn't understand what made it better. I think I was very comfortable with the Canson XL because I knew how it behaved. So when I look back, I realized that it wasn't really the paper that was the problem. I was just responding differently because I had yet to understand exactly how to work with it. Now, transitioning into 2024, I began to move away from my dependency on lines. I was experimenting a little more, discovering how to create shapes through paint. But I would feel like something was missing and that I needed a line somewhere to kind of ground the portrait. But eventually I just started to create portraits without relying on the line. And that opened up a complete different way of thinking. So I could create form through color relationships and value shifts and temperature. The last portraits that I did in 2023 were for Inktober. So I just incorporated ink in the watercolor portraits just so that I could accomplish a goal of painting every day. And so I kind of moved away from that after that Inktober was finished. Now we're heading into 2024. I started to move beyond simply learning how watercolor worked and began discovering what I actually wanted from watercolor. I began to be interested in the qualities that attracted me, the transparency, the atmosphere, and the way that certain pigments just interacted with each other in the water. I did a lot of color swatching, creating color charts, and testing out a lot of combinations. I also began replacing pigments, like pigments that I had previously that were maybe student grade, and choosing pigments more intentionally based on the portraits that I was creating. In 2024, I also purchased large sheets of watercolor paper from various brands. I was just too intimidated and too scared to use them. I would just tell myself that, once I learn something or once I accomplish something, then I could give myself permission to use that paper. But all the color studying that I was doing, the layering, I wasn't going to be able to really see the impact of the knowledge that I was attaining until I took it to cotton paper. Of course, I still use cellulose paper for these studies. I started to realize that the way that I wanted to create portraits, I was limiting myself by not taking the plunge and not going for it and using this paper. I mean, I did buy these huge imperial sheets of watercolor paper, cotton paper, to use them, to cut them down, to be able to see if what I was understanding, the concepts, the techniques, if I could take them from this cellulose paper and have it translate the good quality paper with the good quality pigments. And now when I look at the studies, looking back, I can see that preparation process taking place as I was preparing to use my cotton watercolor paper. And now here we are, we're entering into 2025, and I have made a promise to myself that I'm going to use this paper, and no mistake, no error, no fail is a waste. It's all a learning process. I think I bought maybe 3 or 4 different brands of watercolor paper. I would do these studies. The likeness didn't really matter, but I would just select a different paper each time and just look at the differences and compare. And I would do this repeatedly and allow myself to learn the qualities of each type of paper and each brand, the strengths, the weaknesses, based on my own aesthetic taste. The biggest thing that I learned about watercolor is that it requires a level of surrender, which I'm drawn to, that flow state but there's also a level of control. I love that about the medium, how the paint moves and a lot of unexpected things happen. And there's always an element of surprise. But watercolor also has rules. Drying time matters. Pigment to water ratio matters. The time between layers. What colors and pigments can mix together and what shouldn't mix together. All based on my own aesthetic taste and what I'm trying to accomplish. I have to learn those rules. So watercolor is freedom, but it also requires knowledge. So I would say these final pieces of 2025, I was able to interpret from the references what interests me, which was expressive color choices, atmospheric qualities, and my own personal stylization when it comes to creating portraits, and just creating my own. I wasn't abandoning realism, but I was observing for interpretation purposes. Looking back at these studies, I don't just see mistakes and unfinished attempts. I see questions, I see discovery, I see evidence of growth. Like every painting taught me something about pigment, paper, water, and my own preferences. That was important, my own preferences as an artist. I know that there's still so much to learn, but this collection represents the beginning of my relationship with watercolor that I genuinely want to continue exploring, and I have. And so I will return with my 2026 portraits and the paintings and the things that I've learned. So if you've joined me on this retrospective journey, I really appreciate it, and I thank you, and I appreciate your presence, and I will be back soon.